Hello, welcome to the European Open briefing for Tuesday, September the 19th. I'm Rafi Bajan, currency analyst at xm.com, and we're going to be taking a look at what's happening in the currency markets today. So the focus now is moving on to the Fed. They will begin their today monetary policy later today. Dollar yen hit a fresh 2-month high above the 111 level, though the dollar index isn't faring as well as we think other currencies much stronger against the dollar, particularly the pound. Although the pound has fallen back a bit. Yesterday, Carney was speaking in Washington. He didn't sound quite as hawkish as many were expecting, so that led to a bit of a sell-off for sterling. The Australian dollar is firmer this morning, although it did fluctuate after the release of the RBA's monetary policy meeting minutes, and the Canadian dollar also came under pressure after some remarks by a Bank of Canada policy maker. But let's first start with the dollar. We can see that the recovery in dollar yen has been corresponding the gains in U.S. Treasury yields. 10-year Treasury yields are at a 1-month high. That's mainly on the back of declining risk aversion, both from the impact of the hurricanes we had early in the month and also over North Korea, plus the US inflation numbers for August did revive expectations of another rate hike possibly in December later this year, plus some renewed optimism about tax reforms. So we're seeing dollar yen rise back above the 111 level. It's approaching the 112. It did hit a 2-month high of 111.87 a short while ago. Tomorrow the Fed will announce their latest policy decision. We're likely to get an announcement on the balance sheet reduction plan, which they've already actually outlined quite a few details about how they're going to go about that. So the main focus will be on their rate hike projections as when they publish their latest quarterly economic forecasts. And overall, we are seeing continued risk sentiment. US stocks, major indices, Dow Jones, S&P, and the Nasdaq all hit record highs yesterday. And that's been negative on gold. We can see gold prices have been declining this week, although they have managed to find support just above the 1,300 level. We did have some comments by the US Defense Secretary Jim Mattis. He said that they do have military options which would minimize a potential attack on South Korean capital Seoul. So this does suggest that although for now they are opting for diplomatic resolutions, but they are keeping military options open. President Trump will speak at the United Nations later today, where he will likely mention both North Korea and Iran. Moving on to the pound, we can see the pound did fall back yesterday after Mark Carney's comments at an IMF event in Washington. He said that any rate hike would be limited and gradual, and he was also kind of negative on Brexit, saying that Brexit would hurt UK growth in the short term and push up inflation. We saw pound falling from around 1.3560 to around 1.34 45. It has recovered to around 1.35 at the moment. Euro pound is also slightly above the 2-month lows we saw a couple of days ago, and all this talk about the Bank of England has meant that political uncertainty has been brushed aside for the time being. There's a number of risk events coming up. On Friday we're going to have a speech by Prime Minister May in Florence in Italy. That speech will be important in helping to kickstart the Brexit negotiations, which have stalled. There's been little progress so far. We're also going to have the Conservative Party conference in October, which is seen as being important in uniting the party amid ongoing leadership challenge speculation, which was heightened this week after the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson published his Brexit vision in a newspaper. paper. So all of that for now isn't having as much impact on sterling as the rate hike expectations by the Bank of England. Let's have a quick look at the Australian dollar now, because the Australian dollar did fluctuate after the RBA minutes. It was up prior to the release of the minutes before falling and then before recovering again. It's currently trading at 0.7983 against the US dollar. It seems to be finding resistance at the just below the 0.80 level. It's worth noting that although we have seen a significant recovery in risk sentiment, the risk-sensitive currency, the Aussie and even the Kiwi, haven't recovered as much against the US dollar, although they are up more sharply against the yen. Let's see what the RBA minutes said. They were upbeat about growth, particularly the labor market, although they did note that wage growth will remain muted for some time, so that does mean that they're in no hurry to raise rates. They also voiced concerns about the stronger exchange rate. They said that if it continues to rise, it could that it would be expected to result in a slower pickup in growth and inflation. So that's why we saw the Aussie falling briefly before going back up again. As overall, the minutes were mostly optimistic about the Australian economy. Let's look at the Canadian dollar now, because it did fall sharply. We can see USD/CAD rising sharply yesterday. The Bank of Canada's Deputy Governor Timothy Lane said that as the Canadian dollar is strengthening, we're certainly watching that closely and we'll be taking it into account pretty strongly in our decision making. So that led some analysts to expect that, to reduce their expectations of another rate hike over the coming months, although the possibility of a third rate hike this year is still on the table. We had one in June and another one earlier this month. So that led to the loonie hitting 2-year highs of 1.2057 per US dollar. But for now, we are seeing a bit of a pullback. USD/CAD is trading around 1.2285. Looking at today's economic calendar, the main focus later will be the ZEW Economic Sentiment Index out of Germany. That's expected to show some improvement in September. In the US session, we're going to have a number of housing data, building permits and housing starts, as well as import and export prices and Canadian manufacturing sales. And also we have the latest bi-weekly dairy auction, which would have some impact on the Kiwi. That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching and have a great day.